Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for our life class session for the month of April. We are so excited that you all are here tonight, and I'm excited once again about this session this evening. I want to start off by thanking each and every one of you for your support, for your views, for commenting and sharing and liking and being a part of this experience each and every month. So thank you once again for joining. And tonight's session promises to be yet another great session. And so we are going to get started tonight. I want you to take a few moments, those of us that are viewing, to like this experience, share it, whether you're viewing on Facebook or YouTube. Share this experience with someone, like it, and we will move forward with our session tonight. I want to honor our leaders tonight, Bishop Jimmy L. Williams, our pastor, and our First Lady, Lady June, and our very own church mother, Mother Mary E. Brown. We love our leaders tonight, and we want to take this time to honor them. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining. We do not only have Lighthouse members on this session, but we are joined by our Florida Eastern family and our social media family and friends. So thank you, each and every one, for joining us tonight for this session. So let's start with prayer, and then we will get into our session tonight. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for this time with you once again, for this time to gather ourselves together. Even though it's virtually, God, you have still afforded us the opportunity to be together in this particular setting. So, God, we say thank you tonight. Thank you for keeping us all day long. And, God, we ask that you rest upon this setting tonight, that we may glean what it is that you have for us in this session tonight. We love you, we thank you, and we bless you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All righty. So tonight, thank you all for watching. I see you in the comments. Tonight, we have a very special session for you tonight. And I know our last couple of sessions have been kind of heavy on the self-check and self-help side. So we are going to lighten it up tonight just a little bit, not too much, because our topic tonight is just as serious, but we want to lighten it up just a little bit and give you this information that has been disseminated to us tonight. So we are going to introduce our special guest for this evening. Our special guest tonight is a board certified pediatrician who has been in practice in Florida and in Michigan and in a variety of clinical settings for over the past 23 years. She is a wife, she is a mother, and a very long-standing faithful member of the Lighthouse Worship Center Church of God in Christ. And I thank God for her tonight consenting to be on. And I'm so excited that we have these types of professionals in our midst. It's a blessing to have professionals. Even if you are a professional troublemaker, you do the best at being a professional troublemaker. All right. But our guest tonight is not that. She is a professional in her field. So we thank God tonight for Dr. Lorna Foster Holliday. Let's give her some hearts and round of applause tonight for our special guest. Hi, Dr. Foster.
Good evening, Missionary Palmer. Thank you for such a gracious introduction. It's a blessing to be here.
I'm so glad that you are here, and I'm so glad that I'm able to have this conversation tonight with a familiar face. It's going to be great, and it's going to, I think, put our people at ease as well to have a familiar face to have this conversation tonight. So before we reveal what the topic is, let's play a game of Would You Rather, which is our little life class tradition. We open up with Would You Rather, and then we'll get into our session tonight. So our first question for you, Dr. Foster, is would you rather have more time or would you rather have more money?
More time for sure.
Yeah, more time.
Yes.
I think I'll go along with that as well. Yes. I think I would rather have more time than I can make more money. How about that?
Yes, because we're already wealthy. We're already wealthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wealth is better than money.
It is. It is. All right. So, question number 2. Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button on your life?
Pause, because
Okay.
I wouldn't give anything for my journey.
Okay.
Yes.
That's lovely. That is lovely. I think for me, this is probably a little more difficult, but maybe a pause. I think I would also take the pause. I think, especially in the area or the time we live in social media, it's difficult for us to just be in the
Yes.
moment and enjoy the moment.
Yes, absolutely.
So
We
I
miss
think,
those days. Yes, we do.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I think I take the pause button as well. I see Sister Angela Davis said pause as well. Yeah, I take the pause button. All right. So last question. Would you rather meet George Washington or our current president, President Joe Biden?
I would like to meet our current president, Joe Biden, because I think he has such a heart of compassion for people, and he's overcome obstacles and he's overcome some tragedies that I think that we all can identify with. So it would be a wonderful honor to meet our current president, President Joe Biden.
I love that. I love that. I actually love our current president, President Joe Biden, but I think I would rather meet George Washington, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. I like to meet, and not to say President Joe Biden isn't this because he is this as well, but I like to meet those who are innovators and who have broken ground in areas where no one else has, gone before. So I think I prefer to meet George Washington and then just currently pray that the Lord brings Joe Biden across my path and then I can meet them.
The best of both ends of the historical spectrum.
Right, right. All right. So that was fun. So let's get
Yes, it
into the
was.
meat. Yeah, let's get into the meat of our session tonight. So, for those of you who are viewing and those of you who are familiar with Dr. Holliday, our topic tonight is going to be a medical topic. So, we're going to talk tonight about the COVID-19 vaccine. All right. So, we're going to talk about the vaccine. We're going to get into some in-depth questions, maybe even dispel some myths about the vaccine. There have been
Yes.
there's been current information coming about the vaccine, even as late as today. Some information has come out about the vaccine. So we are going to have a conversation about it. And I want those of you who are viewing us tonight to take notes. We are not here to sway you one way or the other. Okay. So at the end of this session, it is still your decision whether you take the vaccine or not, but we are just here to present the information to you so you can make an educated decision as to whether this is something you would like to participate in. All right. So we're going to get started tonight. And once again, thank you, Dr. Foster, for being here. So let's talk first about what is the purpose of the COVID-19 vaccine? What's the actual purpose of the vaccine? Why should I even entertain the idea of getting it?
Okay, well, first of all, a disclaimer, this is not meant to replace the expert medical advice that you should receive from your own primary care provider, but this hopefully will be an informative session. What is the purpose of the vaccine? So I would first answer that question with a question. What is the purpose of any vaccine? So as a pediatrician, I talk a lot to my patients and my parents about vaccines and the necessity of vaccines and how it helps they help to increase our overall quality of life and sometimes just give us longevity in life. The purpose of vaccines is it's a medical technology that enables us to be injected with small amounts of what we call something that looks like an antigen into our bodies. And in turn, our bodies develop something called antibodies, which fight off disease. And in doing that, we're able to be protected against diseases, viral and bacterial, that can cause significant morbidity, meaning loss of function, loss of quality of life, or even prevent death. So the purpose of the COVID-19 vaccine is to do just that. It is a way to introduce in a safe way something to the body that mimics the virus or the antigen, so that the immune system in turn will create antibodies that are protective. And so the way to look at this is when we encounter certain antigens, our body always wants to fight them off. Some of those antigens produce antibodies that are just allergic antibodies, but some of those antigens produce so many antibodies that they cause a fulminant inflammatory reaction in our bodies that makes it very difficult for us to recover from them. Mm-hmm. And when scientists encounter encounter ways to create vaccinations against some of these more virulent antigens, we want to hopefully take advantage of the opportunity to what we have heard said, mitigate or stop or slow down the rate of infection. And that is what's going on with the COVID vaccine.
Okay, so thank you so much for that information. So I have a question to piggyback off of that one. So if the vaccine, in essence, is going to introduce antibodies into our bodies, if I have already recovered from coronavirus and COVID-19, should I still get the vaccine? Because from what I understand, I have the antibodies.
Absolutely. So okay. in this field, there are a lot of questions that we just don't know, right? Mm-hmm. Hindsight is 20/20, and we learn as we go for a lot of things. And so our bodies aren't being introduced to antibodies. They're being introduced to some foreign substance or virus or bacteria that if it gets into our system, it can cause deleterious effects. So your question is, if I've already had it, and you're right, if you've had something, your immune system does build up protective antibodies. I'm not an immunologist, but as a pediatrician, I know that there are different types of antibodies. There are B cells, there are T cells, there are IgG antibodies, and there are IgM antibodies. What happens when we're infected is we build up a degree of IgG antibodies that tells us that we have already seen this infection. Mm-hmm. But the question that is unanswered is, how long do these protective antibodies last? We do not know the answer to that question. And we also do not know whether or not it takes a mild infection or a severe infection, or how severe of infection does it take for you to mount a protective antibody response. We just simply don't know that. Personally, I had COVID, and I subsequently went and got a test to confirm that, yes, I have antibodies. But to date, there was no information about how high those titers were and whether they were deemed to be protective and for how long they will be protective. So what I would say to someone who's already had the virus, that absolutely, yes, get the vaccine. Every day, the protocols and recommendations are changing. And I do believe I heard something, and do not quote me or take this as gospel, that if you've had it, that I think it is now becoming acceptable to receive one antibody to complete your immunity, so to speak.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you for that. So with that being said, and I know that there are still developments, happening in the medical community. But do we know if in taking the vaccine, is this something that we will have to do annually? Is this something that we will have to need to take every 5 years? Do we have that information yet? How do we, move forward with that?
Yes, that's a very good question. And that question is going to take time to answer. But we do have history, okay, about other vaccines. So, interestingly, this is just a bit of trivia. The first vaccine was actually developed in the late 1790s by Dr. Edward Jenner, and he took the pus from the lesion of a milkmaid from the pox virus and inoculated an 8-year-old boy. I don't know if you're old enough, Missionary Palmer, but when I was younger, we all got the smallpox vaccine, and a lot of us have scars to show it. And, and I believe that immunity has proven to be lifelong, or if it's not lifelong, enough people have been vaccinated that we have achieved a level of herd immunity that if it's out there is having a very difficult time getting to someone who is unprotected. So to answer your question as to whether or not we are going to need a booster, so to speak, that remains to be seen. And there will be retrospective studies at some point in the future to look back at a cohort of people who are willing to go into clinical trials to see whether their antibody titers have remained high enough to be deemed protective or not. And that will help us answer the question for the greater population.
Great.
So we don't know.
Yes, and that makes sense. That makes sense because we're still kind of early in this process, so that makes plenty of sense. You mentioned a term that I actually want to backtrack a little bit to kind of clarify and talk to the people about. So you mentioned herd immunity. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means?
Okay, so it's a concept. And there's some things that are concepts, but they're not necessarily hard science. And this is one of those things that is a concept. And I have to have this conversation with a lot of parents who are what we call anti-vaxxers. Okay. And so what I tell them is, yes, if you decide not to immunize your child, there is a probably pretty good chance that they may not encounter some of these diseases, but there's a greater chance that if they do, they're going to suffer more severely, they're going to have greater morbidity, and you're risking mortality. But what they're taking advantage of is the fact that most people in the population do immunize their children. And in turn, they are taking advantage of the benevolence and the discipline that other parents have bestowed upon their children for their health and well-being, and also the health and well-being of the community at large. So herd immunity, basically, if you would take a herd of sheep, and all 100 of the sheep are immunized, and then you take a baby sheep, I think is a lamb, I'm not sure, and you put that lamb in the center of that fold, and that fold walks around and moves around, and they stay relatively close together. It's going to be very difficult for any disease that those other sheep have been protected against to get to that little baby in the middle. So that's called herd immunity. If the people around you are protected, you're less likely to get infected. That's why we tell parents of young infants who are too young to get immunized, if you're immunized, especially against the flu, which can cause severe respiratory illness, if you're immunized, it's less likely that your under 6-month-old infant is going to catch the flu or be exposed to it. So hopefully that's clarified things a little bit for you.
Yes, that not only clarified it, that'll preach, Dr. Foster. That illustration about the sheep and the lamb, that I felt a little quickening in my mortal body. Okay, so, but thank you for clarifying that. We hear these terms a lot, watching CNN, Fox News, whatever it is that you watch, Dr. Fauci, and sometimes terms are used and we aren't clear on them. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience knew what herd immunity is. So let's take a moment to talk about the 3 2.5 vaccines that are available now, because I know Johnson & Johnson is on hold. So let's talk about the difference in the vaccines, and I guess we could talk about the cons and the pros of each, or the benefits, or the differences in the vaccines.
Yes, ma'am. Certainly. So what do you want to know? I can just give an overall spiel about it. Okay. So far, so first of all, let's talk about how this vaccine came to be, because I know that that's one of the questions. How did we get it so fast, right?
Yes.
So the typical vaccine takes about 6-7 years, sometimes 10 years to get approved to come on market to be used or get to become FDA approved. This one was developed within a year. That's a short period of time. Mm-hmm. But the way I look at it, and I think you will agree, and the audience will also agree, that necessity is the mother of invention. And we were in dire need of some invention that was going to stay this plague, as so to speak. And so I can preach a little bit on this because I've been reading about the sin of Korah in the Old Testament. And, some of the people got a little big-headed and thinking that, they can get away from sin and get by with compromise. And some of them decided they were going to challenge Aaron and Moses about their priesthood. And God told them to bring censers or rods for each tribe. And then he said, Moses said, well, if you guys are destroyed, then it wasn't of God for you to question us. If you stay alive, and then it was of God. Mm-hmm. And of course, you know that Korah and his people, God opened up the earth and swallowed them, and they were destroyed. But before he told the children of Israel to get back, because you don't want to be where the people who are being disobedient and compromising are. Right. But even after that, the wrath of God continued. I'm not going to say this plague is the wrath of God, but it's a plague in the land, okay? Right. So what happened is Aaron had to judiciously pick up a censer with incense, and he ran in between the crowd of the Israelites, and wherever the censer and the smoke went, the plague stopped. So this is our golden censer, okay, so to speak. And so it was developed in less than a year, but it did not fail to go through necessary clinical trials before it was approved for use in the bigger population. So it's not as though steps were skipped over, but there became a great collaboration amongst scientists all over the world to allow this to happen. And of course, there are vaccines that they tried to get approved that were not. But what we have today are the Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccine use a technology called an mRNA technology, and I won't get into all the details about that. And the Johnson & Johnson uses something called a DNA technology through a virus called adenovirus. So those are different ways of introducing the antigen to the body and to get the response we want is the difference between the vaccines. So what the vaccines do, and you probably have all seen on the news when they put up a picture of the coronavirus, it has spikes on it, on the outside. Yes. So that's the spike protein. And for me, that's maybe the spear. So if I can get your spear away from you, I can probably destroy you. Mm-hmm. And so the antibodies are against the spike. The antibodies that are formed in your body are against the spike protein. But each of those vaccines have a slightly different way of causing your cells to mimic a spike protein so that your body develops specific antibodies against what it sees that will in turn protect you if you ever actually encounter the real virus. So they all do the same thing. Moderna and Pfizer have similar technologies versus the Johnson & Johnson. Of course, the Moderna and Pfizer is a 2-dose vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson is a 1-dose vaccine.
Okay, it doesn't get any clearer than that. Thank you so much for that. So I have a question, and I just want to reiterate to the audience tonight that this information is not to be used in the stead of you talking to your doctor. So as we move forward with these questions, take the information, take notes, but you still want to confer with your physician. Okay. So my next question is, if I have pre-existing conditions, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, whatever the condition is, how should I move forward with the vaccine? Should I take the vaccine? What's your recommendation there, or, information on that?
Yes, ma'am. So the simple answer is absolutely. If you
Okay.
have any pre-existing illness, it is my recommendation personally that if you are 16 and above for the Pfizer and 18 and above for the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, that you should seek out some consultation or seek out the advice of your primary care physician as to whether or not you should get this vaccine. In my practice, personally, I've been writing special letters for my asthmatic, obese adolescents to get the vaccine, because once you have these pre-existing illnesses, if you have them, then there are other things that typically go along. Sometimes we have what are called comorbidities. Once you have one thing, often it's something else is going on. If you have obesity, you may also have hypertension. If you have obesity, you may also have diabetes. If you have one autoimmune disease, it usually begets another autoimmune disease or puts you at risk for that. And when all of that happens, your body, kind of works overtime, and your immune system gets a little weakened sometimes. And so you become much more susceptible to not only contracting something, but not doing well or having an adverse outcome to actually after you actually contract it. And that includes, the elderly population.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for that. So my next question is, once I've taken the vaccine, gotten both of my shots, do I still need to proceed with safety precautions? So wearing my mask, social distancing, those types of safety precautions. Can I let my guard down? Do I still need to keep my guards up? That type of thing once I've gotten vaccinated.
Yes. Well, one thing about vaccinations, I think, and especially since we're on a faith-based platform, we really are concerned about everybody, right?
Absolutely.
So the CDC, we follow the CDC recommendations. However, should we still mask? Should we still wash our hands? Should we still social distance? And the answer to that is yes. Number one, in my opinion, is because it takes time to build up the proper protective immunity. You don't get the shot today, and tomorrow you have absolutely no chance of getting coronavirus, okay?
Right.
And there have been some studies that I've heard of that you can still carry the coronavirus in your respiratory tract. Even if you're not someone that might get seriously ill from it, you can pass it to someone else who can get seriously ill or even die from it. So until we have reached a level of protection in our community, which will allow us all to relax all of our measures, the measures that we're taking, I think it's smart to continue to follow the CDC guidelines. And as they relax those guidelines, and we should follow suit. Personally, I don't buy into gloves because I'm going to touch the same things with my gloves as I do with my own hands. And every time I touch something with my gloves, I'm not going to wash my gloves. But every time I touch something with my hands, I'm going to sanitize or wash my hands. As far as social distancing, I think I think we should just be prudent about that. And if we're in restaurants and closer settings, to be with people who we know are negative or have been tested or already have the vaccine, so that we can reduce the risk of passing it to our more vulnerable population. And in my practice personally, there's been a negative fallout from lack of social distancing, and we're seeing lots more diseases in our teenagers.
Yeah.
Because they're not doing it.
Right. Okay, so what are some symptoms, minor or major, but mostly minor? What are some symptoms that we can possibly get from receiving the vaccine? Maybe fatigue, or, what are some of the symptoms that everyone doesn't get symptoms? I know that, but what are some things that maybe they will let us know once you receive the vaccine, you may have these particular symptoms after?
Okay. So this is a common phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we talk about the flu vaccine. And I got to the point where I stopped arguing with people because it becomes a school of thought. It becomes dogma to some people that believe that if they get the flu vaccine, it causes them to get the flu. But similar to the flu vaccine and other vaccines, after the COVID vaccine, yes, your immune system might very well inform you that, yes, I have seen something foreign and I am going to respond to it. Just like
Right.
if you get hit in the arm the next day, or if you have a car accident, right away, you may not know that your neck is hurting, but the next day you might know, okay? So yes, it's many people get fever, fatigue, muscle aches, all of that, just like after the flu vaccine. And it can last 24 to 48 hours. It can feel horrible, but it's just telling you that your immune system is working and you get over it without any deleterious long-term sequelae. So it is very possible. And from what I hear, it's more possible or more likely after the second vaccine.
Okay. Okay. That's helpful. That's helpful for those of us who like to have all of the information going in and then
Yes, and
afterwards.
you should just treat it with your standard Tylenol or Motrin and lots of fluids and rest.
Is it a good, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're fine.
Is it a good practice to take either Tylenol or Motrin before getting the vaccine? I've heard some people say that as well. Like before I took the vaccine, the morning of or whatever, I took a Tylenol or Motrin. Is that a good practice to do that?
I'm not going to say good or bad.
Okay.
I don't think taking a dose of Motrin, I know taking a dose of Motrin or Tylenol is most likely not going to harm you.
Okay.
As a physician, just based upon my Hippocratic oath of not first doing no harm,
Right.
I tell my patients, even with the young babies, I do not treat symptoms that don't exist.
Got it.
Because the symptoms, I mean, for me, when I went to medical school, 75% of the diagnosis was in your history. And so if you cover the history or cover the symptom, or don't tell me when you come in, oh, I already gave them I've been giving Motrin for 3 days and they've had fever for 3 days, that's going to change my decision making. So personally,
Right.
I say no. I don't think that people should be in the habit of treating symptoms that don't exist. I just think that that's more responsible, but that's my opinion. Other physicians may differ.
Okay. And that sounds good. I've actually never heard it put that way before, but that makes sense. Treating symptoms that don't exist, that actually does make sense. Okay. So we actually have a question in the chat that I want to throw in here. And then we will pick back up with our discussion. But Sister Dawn Palmer said, how do you care for someone that may have symptoms from the vaccine? Should you stay away from them, or can you serve the person without worrying?
Okay, well, first of all, I think just like when we were quarantined, everyone was practicing wearing masks, personal protective equipment, social distancing as much as you can. But of course, if you're in the same household with someone, you can't always do that. So if you're caring for someone that has symptoms from the vaccine, no, don't stay away from them. They need your care. They may not even be able to get up the stairs because of their muscle aching. They may not be able to get up and get something to drink without your assistance. But yes, have on your mask, because as I previously stated, just because you get the vaccine does not automatically mean after 2 minutes after the vaccine that you are not susceptible to getting COVID still. You can still have COVID and have been vaccinated. It takes time for your immune system to build up protection. So how do you care for someone that may have symptoms? Well, we want to avoid going to emergency rooms at all costs. if they're at home and it's not life-threatening, or they don't seem to be fainting or having cardiorespiratory compromise, then just supportive care and protect yourself.
Okay.
Supportive care, and you actually serve the person without worrying. Absolutely, just like you're living your life every day and wearing your mask. Something that has come out of this is because everyone is wearing a mask, and I can attest to this, I have not diagnosed one case of flu in my practice. So the mask really works for helping us and preventing us from spreading a lot of different diseases and viruses that usually between October and March at least is flu season. And I haven't seen one flu case, and I have to read the literature, but I know that the rate of flu infection is significantly decreased compared to years in the past.
That's good to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's encouraging too, because I know sometimes we can get very tired of the masks, but that's encouraging for us to keep wearing them as well.
And it may guide our behavior in future flu seasons. We may just get accustomed to, I'd rather wear a mask and to prevent myself from getting the flu or giving it to someone else.
Yeah, that's
people in the Asian countries do that. The minute they hear there's a new virus, everyone masks up and they have decreased rates of infection.
That makes sense, because actually one of my questions, that's a great segue into one of my questions. So I was going to ask about, so in the United States, we have the highest numbers of cases and deaths, right? But what is it that we're doing that's so different than your, other countries, Norway, Sweden, whomever, who have minimal cases, minimal deaths? What is it that, we're doing that's so different than what they're doing? And how can we, even in our homes, maybe conform, even if we can't as a country conform to what it is that they're doing?
Well, I don't have the absolute answers to those, but I've read some things, and I think consistency and compliance is one thing. Compliance to the recommendation, that means doing it regularly and not spotty, not here and there. I'll do it at work, but then when I go out to dinner or when I go out with my friends, but just being consistent is one thing. We've had parts of the country that refuse the mandates or decide that, we don't feel masks are necessary. But in some of these countries, I think there's much more of a collective agreement to do it, and do it for as long as necessary until the rate of infection goes down. As I previously spoke, Asian countries have done that. I think Vietnam has a lower risk. I know Hong Kong. Then we have Australia. We have Germany. So a lot of them have much lower rates of infection, and then they have stricter border control in some of these countries as well. So those are some of the potential reasons.
That makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that information, because that does make sense. I think too, we have a problem in this country with the whole love thy neighbor. And sometimes we can get in our own bubbles and not be concerned about what others are doing. But as a community, as a family, then as a community, then as a church, then as a country, if we are consistently looking out for each other, I think that would help us, not just as it relates to the coronavirus, but any aspect of our lives. So thank you for that information. So I think my last question is, and this one's a bit of a doozy, but I have one more question. So do we have any information as it relates to fertility? I was watching a podcast earlier this week where they were talking about the COVID vaccine, and they talked a little bit about if the vaccine would affect fertility. So I wanted to kind of touch on that this evening for those families or, women that would like to have children going forward. How does the vaccine affect that?
Okay. Well, as far as I know, and I'm pretty confident in this answer that there's absolutely no evidence that the vaccine affects fertility. Okay. However, infection and death by COVID does. I'm not trying to be facetious. Okay.
Right, right.
And we have heard recently that the Jnj vaccine was paused, and actually, I think the pause has been lifted because there were about 15 cases. There were about 15 cases of people, of women specifically, I believe between the ages of about 18 and 49, something like that. But they were mostly in childbearing years. I think the average age was 37 that developed something called thrombocytopenia, thrombocytopenia syndrome. And that can lead to a type of cavernous thrombosis syndrome that can also affect the brain and other parts of the body, including deep vein thrombosis, all of which is very concerning. In particular, women of childbearing age during pregnancy can develop a syndrome called HELP syndrome. H stands for hemolysis, EL stands for elevated liver enzymes, and P stands for low platelets. So in general, because of that whole big picture, the recommendation is that if you are in childbearing years or between those ages, and once again, consult with your own primary care doctor about that. If you are of childbearing age, you should avoid the J&J vaccine until we know better. However, there are some advantages to the J&J. You don't want to throw that out of the window because, number one, it's a one-shot vaccine. Mm-hmm. Although the rate of effectiveness is lower than Moderna and Pfizer, from my knowledge, it's the vaccine that's going to be more available to people who have less access to medical care. Migrant workers, people who don't have insurance, people who don't have the transportation to get them back for their second vaccine. So it serves a great purpose for many, many populations. So as far as it affecting fertility, there's absolutely no evidence. However, in saying that, it's not as though in the future we may not find out things or adverse side effects that are a result of having received this vaccine. As a pediatrician, there have been vaccines that have come and go throughout my career because, for instance, an oral rotavirus vaccine several years ago caused twisting of the gut in some, or it was associated, I won't say caused, but it was associated with something called intussusception or GI blockage. And so we took it off the market, or it was taken off the market. I won't say we, I wasn't involved in that decision, but it was taken off the market. And now we have a different rotavirus vaccine, and we don't see rotavirus. I haven't seen rotavirus in years, but they had to do some twerking of the technology and create a different vaccine. But at the same time, we don't have children and going into the hospital with hypovolemic shock, dying from a preventable disease. And that is a nugget that needs to be taken away. Vaccines are available to prevent preventable diseases. These are things we don't have to suffer from.
Right. So, okay. So my last point or question or I guess point I would like you to speak to is for those who have a kind of a broken relationship with the medical community or mistrust in the medical community, how can we reaffirm their trust in the medical community? I know that some people, as it relates to speaking to this particular vaccine, which I won't even entertain here, but have brought in, the Tuskegee experiment, which has nothing to do with this, but have, brought in those types of things that the government has done or, whatever. But how can you speak to someone's mistrust in the medical community and encouraging them, not just as it relates to vaccines, but encouraging them to seek medical attention?
Okay, so I gave a little thought to this question,
Mm-hmm.
and for from my knowledge, people who go into the medical field make a great commitment to want to effect change in the lives of people positively,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that our bodies are vulnerable in so many ways, from external aberrations to internal aberrations. We're going to need, at some point in our lives, some conduit to help us get better. I hesitate to use the word heal, especially in the faith community, because we know God is the healer. We know Jesus is our great physician. We are just, we're ministers, we're tools. So as far as, things like the Tuskegee experiment, those were a subset of people with ill intentions. As far as the vaccine, we see people from all walks of lives and ethnicities and socioeconomic standings getting this vaccine. So you can look at that and say, well, it's not targeting any particular population.
Correct.
My other thought was, well, we put our trust into the hands of people who give us our heat, give us our food, give us our gas, give us our transportation. And can we assign to them some malfeasant intention? Possibly. However, with everything in life that is offered to us to help assist us get through this journey, you have to weigh the benefits versus the risks. And I think everybody has heard that by now. And everything we do in life has a potential risk and a potential benefit. And everything we do in life has a consequence, not even a potential consequence. So you have to weigh the benefits versus the risk. It would not be FDA approved for emergency use authorization, which is that's what the vaccines are approved for right now, if the benefit, which is to mitigate the spread and the rate of disease and death, loss of livelihood, loss of sustenance, it wouldn't have been FDA approved for emergency use authorization if the overwhelming evidence didn't prove that the benefit outweighed the real or perceived risk. So those are some words of encouragement that I would offer to people who may have a little mistrust of the medical system, the medical community. And once again, those of us who have gone into medicine, if it be someone like me who's in primary care, to neurosurgeons, to surgeons, to OBGYN, to orthopedic doctors, our goal is to first, we make an oath, either the Hippocratic or something similar, to first do no harm. So when I say things like, I don't write prescriptions for acetaminophen and ibuprofen because I'm not going to treat a symptom that's not there. That's based on an oath I took. First, do no harm, because there's such a thing as acetaminophen toxicity. If I write, my patients come in and say my kid had a runny nose, I gave him Tylenol, and I'm like, why? Tylenol does not treat colds. So I have to educate them. Education is a form of medicine. So talk to your physician.
Thank you so much for addressing that. And for those of us who are in the Christian community as well, I don't think that it is a mistake that Luke was chosen as one of the disciples because he was a physician. So I have trouble with people who have trouble with, going to the doctor, that type of thing. I had an uncle I was very close to as a young girl who I had to forgive after his death because I feel like his death was untimely because he would not go to the doctor. So as a result of that, I held, a resentment in myself toward him because I felt like you should have still been here if you had just gone to the doctor. So I think that, as a community, we need to encourage encourage each other to seek help. I know that I am an advocate always for mental health, but that goes for physical as well. So just like you would go to see the doctor for, cancer, if your thoughts are not the way they should be, you should be able to see a psychologist or psychiatrist as well. So we have one more question that's in the comments that I'd like to address. And then we are going to close for tonight. So District Missionary Carla Hill said it appears that more women are having more side effects from the vaccines than men. Is there anything documented on this? So Dr. Foster, could this be because more women are getting the vaccines? So we have more data for that. I'm not the professional, you are. So is there any documentation on this?
Yes, there's a lot of documentation on this, and I spoke briefly to it, but District Missionary Hill, if you want to write this down, you can write down Covet and TTS, just put T as in Tom, T as in Tom, S as in Sam, that's thrombocytopenia syndrome. And that's where about 15 women of childbearing age or within that age range have developed complications from the Jnj, they believe, vaccine, or that they developed some platelet disorder after receiving the vaccine. I hesitate to say it's because of the vaccine, because the way we look at it in medicine, if anything happens within a short period of time after receiving a vaccine, we call it a potential adverse effect. So if you get a vaccine and you walk out and step on a nail, that can be reported as a adverse effect. So I would write down TTS and COVID vaccine, and that you should be able to Google a lot of information about that and the recommendations that are out there to avoid one of the vaccines in a certain subpopulation of women. So that's what I can tell you. As far as whether or not women are getting the vaccine at a higher rate than men, I really can't answer that question for you.
Okay, thank you so much. I see Pastor Tony Hill has joined us. Pastor Hill, we are not encouraging people to get the vaccine, but we are giving them the information for them to make the decision for themselves. So this session tonight was just to give everyone who is viewing some clarity, possibly answer some questions, dispel some myths as it relates to the COVID vaccine. And at the end of the day, I pray that you all are prayerful about your decision and that you consult your physicians as well. I want to thank Dr. Foster for this time this evening. You did an excellent job, and I'm so excited that you even agreed to be with us tonight. I'm so happy to have had this time with you. Yes. So thank you once again. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As always, I feature a graphic tee designer every month. So this month we are featuring the Agape brand. So my shirt tonight is from the Agape brand. Tonight's t-shirt shout out is from my very good friend, Miss Nikita Williams, and you can visit the tag that's there on your screen if you want to patronize, and she has plenty of designs. I believe I have one of each of them. I love her t-shirts and I love graphic tees. And any of you that are on the line, feel free to reach out to me, DM me, text me, email me. If you have merch, we want to support you as well. All right. So we're going to take this time just for a moment to open up for you all to share a gift with us for this life class tonight. We thank you all for joining us again. The session was excellent this evening. So feel free to share a gift with us tonight. We're not going to give you an amount, but feel free to share a gift with us this evening for this Lighthouse Life Class. And while you are doing that, I want to give you just a minor update for the next couple of months for Life Class. So our bishop and Brother Chris are doing the Bible class sessions for the next couple of months. and they want to really tackle some of these topics that are in the Bible class books. So for the next couple of months, we are going to push our life class to Tuesday night, just for the next couple of months, and then we will resume our schedule. So our next life class will be on May 25th at 7 p.m. That's Tuesday evening, May 25th at 7 p.m. And of course, if you are following us on social media, we will send you reminders and updates as to when you can join us for life class. But thank you, each and every one of you, as always, for your support. Thank you for viewing us this evening. And even for those who will be going back to review to view the recording, thank you for viewing as well. Again, thank you, Dr. Foster, for this time. We love you. Thank you so very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great evening. God bless you.
Bless you. God bless you, Jasmine. Love you.
Love you too.